And so tonight's message is titled, What Do I Do With My Insecurities? And just like that Bible verse that we read Matthew 22, 36 through 40. And I just kind of wanted to read it again because we keep coming back to this verse time and time again. I feel like we have discussed just the importance of it, and we've talked about it when we were walking through the book of Mark. But also, too, we're bringing it up again, this whole idea of the greatest commandment, that we're to love the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your mind and with all of your strengths. In some texts it covers. But this word heart, that's what we've really been focusing on in this series. And we've talked about before that the Hebrew word that's used for heart is lev. And lev is an important word because it means that we are loving God with all of our emotions, with all of our desires, with all of our thoughts, with all of the things that we are thinking. It encompasses really the body of who we are. And so the word heart, to love God with all of your heart, it means something much deeper than to just love God with your internal organ. But it also means to love God with all of your emotions. And so when we feel that sense of insecurity, what we're going to be talking tonight about is really how do we love God in the middle of all of those insecurities. Because if you're anything like me, it can be really hard to love not even others or even God with your whole heart when you feel insecure. Sometimes it's even hard to love yourself when you feel insecure. And that can be that first kind of road bump that we have to get over. One of the things that we've been talking about, too, in this series is it's important to talk about emotions at church, not just in counseling or maybe with friends or family members or at school. It's important to talk about emotions at church because of this phrase that we've been discussing called emotional discipleship. And we've said emotional discipleship is surrendering all that we feel to Jesus and responding like him, saying, okay, God, I feel these emotions, but I'm also surrendering them all to you, and I want to know how to respond better like you. We've also brought up this quote, too, and I'm trying to recap so that we can get back on the same page, from this book called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. And it says it's important to be spiritually mature while remaining, it's impossible, to be spiritually mature while remaining emotionally immature. And so we have to remind ourselves, well, if we want to be spiritually mature and we also want to be emotionally mature, what does emotional maturity look like? Emotional maturity is identifying our feelings and responding appropriately. And that's a big phrase there, responding appropriately, because you might have friends that you might think of who feel big feelings, and the way they respond, you're like, okay, chill out. And so we have to learn how to say, this is what I'm feeling, and here's how I'm going to respond in an appropriate way. And one of my favorite ways that I learn more about emotions and more just about how we walk through life and how we respond to things, and this is the teacher coming out, but I love kids' movies, so we've got a little game, and I have some prizes. Woo! Got a little game, and I've got 3 prizes because there's going to be 3 quotes from 3 different kids' movies. They're big bags, too. Got some Lifesaver gummies. You can pick your choice, first come, first serve. Some Trolleys, my personal favorite. And then I just have a good old classic Sour Patch Kid, okay? We got 3 movies, 3 quotes. The first person to tell me which movie it's from, and they're kids' movies, okay? They're kids' movies, so just keep that in your head. You can pick which bag, okay? 3 quotes, 3 movies. Okay, you ready for the first one? All right. No matter what kind of animal you are, from the biggest elephant to our first fox, I implore you, try to make the world a better place. Look inside yourself and recognize that change starts with you. It starts with me. Does anybody know? I'm going to go Jacob. Zootopia is the correct answer. Which one would you like? Sour Patch Kids. Gone. All right, second movie. Here we go. Johnny, where are you? You're going to have to help me figure out whose hand goes up first, okay? Okay. Here we go. This one's a little tough, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. You made a lot of mistakes. A lot. And you will make a lot more in the future. If you let that stop you, we might as well lay down right now and give up.
Hey, no giving up. Cars.
No, but that's a great, honestly, that was a really great guess. I was considering putting that movie in there, but no. Anybody know?
No, it's wrong.
Inside Out, yes! Nice! Okay, which one?
I've never even seen that.
Which one? Lifesaver gummies. Sorry. My bad. Insecure my gummies. Okay, my bad. You should give him a gummy for that one. I apologize. Clearly was not athletically inclined. Okay, last one. Personal favorite of mine, okay? You don't have to be the bad guy. You are the most talented, most interesting, most extraordinary person in the universe. You are capable of amazing things because you are the special. It is not Lego Batman. Oh no. Hampton who? Oh, okay. The Lego movie. I'm not gonna throw it this time, so here you go. Okay, the Lego movie. Yes, very nice. You are all very well educated in your children's movies. Congratulations. But let me tell you about the Lego movie, my guy Emmett over here. Emmett is probably one of my most favorite characters when I think of insecure characters. He is a construction worker who believes that the key to being accepted is blending in and having other people approve of you. He follows all of the instruction manuals to a T. He laughs when everybody's supposed to laugh. And honestly, he tries so hard to be liked. But we all know, if you've seen this movie, raise your hand if you've seen this movie. Okay, perfect. We all know deep down inside that Emmett struggles with something. He struggles with feeling completely unremarkable. Like, that's kind of his whole plot, his character dilemma, his character versus self, if you will. He feels super unremarkable no matter how much he tries to blend in. And eventually, after a series of just these kind of coincidental events, Emmett, he fulfills this supposed prophecy where everybody believes that he is the special with the face of yellow, and he's going to come and he's going to be the hero of the story. However, Emmett's biggest struggle isn't word business and this whole Taco Tuesday ordeal that goes on in here and all of the other villains that he faces. Honestly, his biggest enemy is the voice inside his head telling him that he isn't special, that he isn't chosen, and that he isn't enough to do anything to make a difference. And honestly, as random and as quirky as this movie is, I was sitting in the bus on the way to a student retreat with my middle schoolers, and I was watching this kind of feels a little deep and personal to me because he is experiencing an emotion and a voice that we do too, and that voice is insecurity. And so in preparation for this little message, I did a little research, and the world's definition of insecurity is this. Insecurity is a lack of confidence or peace that arises when we base our identity, worth, or safety on ourselves or circumstances, and such things fall short of our expectations. Studies from organizations like the American Psychological Association and Pew Research Center, this is stuff that you've heard before, so I'm just going to browse through it, but reports that Gen Z shows significantly higher levels of anxiety, stress, and feelings of inadequacy compared to previous generations. Raise your hand if you're in Gen Z and you know it. Raise your hand if you're Gen Alpha. I think everybody in here is Gen Z. Okay, I'm also in Gen Z, so I feel this to a T. It says, though, that teenagers and young adults today, they have higher anxiety, higher depression, more feelings of loneliness, and also, you've guessed it, more insecurities. And I don't want to be that person up here talking about how broken our generation is because we have phones and because we have technology and all of you are just screenagers. That's not the kind of person I'm up here trying to be right now. That presents its own sort of challenges that we have to overcome. The thing I wanted to tell you guys is that I 100% believe that our generation is actually not weak. I don't think that our generation is weak. We're just dealing with a lot of pressures that no other generation has faced in quite some way, and so if anything, we're a little misunderstood sometimes. Gen Z isn't insecure because we have grown up as screenagers who are just decaying from the brain out. But I think that Gen Z, me and you, we really are facing a lot of pressure in culture, in society, and it's making us insecure because we're growing up in a world that is constantly evaluating us. It's exhausting. Your looks, your opinions, your popularity, and even your future. Most generations didn't grow up under that kind of microscope like we are, where everything is so public to everyone else. And it's not even just a more detailed comparison, it's a constant comparison. Previous generations, they would compare themselves to maybe 20, 30 people a day at school, and now you guys compare yourself to millions of people across the internet every single day. And not only that, but sometimes you don't even really know that you're comparing yourself to all of those people on the internet. Insecurities also popping up earlier than ever. Previous generations had time to figure everything out for themselves. They explored their talents, their gifts, and even their style naturally. And it was a process of really trial and elimination. However, us, it feels like sometimes we don't even have the time to fail, or we can't risk it to fail. You have to show up ready in case someone posts a snap and that one person's on that story. Or heaven forbid, you don't know what you want to do when you're 18 because it feels like everybody else that's online does. You are in a generation that is expected to know who you are before you've even had time to become that person. And that creates so much anxiety about being wrong, about being judged, and about being rejected. Plus, it doesn't help that everything is public and permanent. Social evaluation, it just never turns off. Before smartphones, school drama mostly stayed at school. And now social life continues 24/7. Before you even get out to the parking lot for school to drive back home, you're on your phone, texting your friends, scrolling through Instagram, and a post can be liked, it could be ignored, it could be screenshot, it could be judged. And it's even become called like this whole idea of a constant scoreboard of social approval. Psychologists have actually just recently termed it. They've called it quantified popularity because of our generation. How many followers do you get? How many likes do you get? How much attention do you get on different social media platforms? How many people are texting you? How many people are on FaceTime with you each day? Quantified popularity. But when we're on social media and when we're interacting with people 24/7, we kind of become numb to the fact that we are comparing ourselves to other people. You see a post about a guy who gets an athletic scholarship, and you think to yourself, he got a scholarship to that school? I must be pretty insignificant compared to him because I haven't gotten any kind of offers like that. I'll never look as good as her. She looks like she isn't even trying. When I try, I don't even look half as good. They're hanging out together, and I wasn't invited, so they probably have a separate group message, and I'm just not on it, and I'm just the pity friend. 300 people liked his photo, 75 people like mine. I guess based on those numbers and statistics, then people just are not as interested in my life as they are in his. Her life is super aesthetic and expensive looking, and mine's boring, and I can't afford that. Or even, she clearly knows what she's doing with her life. I'm just drifting by, so I guess my small wins aren't really wins anymore at all. That's the process that goes on in our mind. So if insecurity, by the world's definition, is a lack of confidence or peace that arises when we base our identity, our worth, our safety on ourselves and our circumstances, those things fall short? No duh, we are the most insecure generation ever. We are riddled with insecurity because ourselves and our circumstances fall short of our expectations every single day, because we have created an unattainable goal that continues to grow increasingly unreachable every single day. Not to mention that we will never perfectly meet our expectations. We are too human for that. So I propose a different definition, a biblical definition of insecurity, which is not in the Bible, so don't quote it as if it were. But maybe instead, insecurity is a lack of confidence or peace that arises when we base our identity, worth, or safety on ourselves or circumstances instead of God's character. Because those other things, our identity, our worth, safety, on ourselves and circumstances, those things are always going to fail us to a certain degree. They're never going to be perfect. I'm never going to be perfect. My life circumstances are never going to be perfect. If I expect them to be, I'll always be insecure. But if I place my identity, my worth, and my safety in God's character, something that's never changing, I have a better probability of being more secure in who I am and how I feel safe. This is really encouraging because it tells us that we get a little say in shaping our insecurity, that we don't have to let it control us. We can choose whose voice matters, and we can choose who defines our worth. So the only influence that really should be holding any sort of weight in our identity, our worth, and our safety are things that don't change, which would be God's character. And so tonight, while the Bible doesn't explicitly say the word insecurity as we have coined it in our own modern terms, we're going to look at 3 different Bible passages. If you don't have a Bible, I know there's Bibles around the room, and you're going to want it tonight because we're going to be looking through 3 different Bible passages. where people experience insecurity in 3 different ways. And we're going to start from the beginning of the Bible, we're going to kind of go in the middle, and then we're going to close it out in one of the Gospels. But the first place that we're going to look at is Exodus 3. We're going to be in verses 7 through 14 for a little bit, and then we'll pop over to chapter 4 to read verses 1 through 17. So if you have your Bible, take it out. We're going to be looking at a passage you're probably familiar with, but it really circulates around the idea of insecurity in your abilities. Insecurity in your abilities. You're probably familiar with the guy Moses. He was an adopted Israelite, and he was raised in an Egyptian royalty type home. And he faces kind of some moral dilemma as he's growing up. And he sees one of his fellow men by heritage getting beat up by an Egyptian, and all of the Israelites there enslaved in Egypt. And so in a space of a moral wedge, he decides to start beating the Egyptian instead, and then ends up killing him. He's like, well, shoot. Guess I get the death penalty now. So he runs away and he flees to this land of Midian, where he kind of like starts a completely new life. He erases his identity, he gets away from Egypt, he gets married, he has a family, and he spends the next 40 years working as a shepherd in the wilderness. And by the time we reach Exodus 3, where we're going to be starting, Exodus 3, chapter 3, verse 7, Moses is around 80 years old. And he's kind of living this quiet life far away from Egypt and the people he once was trying to help. And that's when, in the middle of an ordinary day, watching some sheep, God appears to Moses in a burning bush, and that's where we're going to be. And he asks him to do something that he never expected. And so we're going to look at chapter 3, verse 7. It says, "The Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to a place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now, behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt." But Moses said to God, "Who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt?" He said, "But I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain." Then Moses said to God, "Well, if I come to the people of Israel and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' then what should I say to them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am." And he said, "Say this to the people of Israel, 'I am has sent you.'" And then jump over to chapter 4, and we're going to be reading from verse 1. Then Moses answered, "But behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice." He's kind of getting annoying, honestly. "For they will say, 'The Lord did not appear to you.'" The Lord said to him, What is that in your hand?" He said, "A staff." And he said, "Throw it on the ground." So he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses ran from it. But the Lord said to Moses, "Put out your hand and catch it by the tail." So he put out his hand, and he caught it, and it became a staff on his hand, that they might believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you. Again, the Lord said, "Put your hand inside your cloak." And he put his hand inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. Then God said, "Put your hand back inside your cloak." So he put his hand back inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. "If they will not believe you," God said, "or listen to the first sign, they might believe the latter sign. If they will not believe even these 2 signs, or listen to your voice, you shall take some water from the Nile and pour it on dry ground, and the water that you shall take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground." But Moses said to the Lord, "Oh, my Lord, I am not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow in speech and of tongue." Then the Lord said to him, "Who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute, or deaf, or seeing, or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak." But he said, "Oh, my Lord, please send someone else." Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, "Is there not Aaron, your brother, the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Behold, he is coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you both what to do. He shall speak for you to all the people, and he shall be your mouth, and you shall be as God to him. And take in your hand this staff with which you shall do the signs." Honestly, in this passage, Moses really agitates me. Because it's like time and time again, he meets God with a question, he meets God with an excuse, and God provides an answer. And then he comes up with some other way as to why he's not really significant enough to be leading the people out here. But this is really the moment when Moses' insecurity begins, because the man that God calls to lead a nation feels completely unqualified. And when God calls Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, Moses repeatedly doubts his own abilities and responds. His responses show the same thought patterns that people oftentimes show today when they feel insecure. And so that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at how Moses responds and how God responds. Really, the first thing that we see is that when Moses asks, "Who am I?" God responds by telling Moses who he is instead. Moses' first response, his calling, is self-doubt. He looks at his past, his weaknesses, and his limitations instead of the actual calling itself. Instead of looking at the calling God gives him, he decides to look at himself and come up with a list of reasons as to why he is not eloquent enough to fulfill that calling. He also responds with really kind of these fears of rejection and credibility. That when he feels insecure, he decides to project these fears of, well, the people aren't going to believe me. The people aren't going to listen to me. They're not going to think that I'm worth it. And then he also shifts from some external excuses to all the personal limitations that he has. He focuses on what he cannot do instead of what God can do. And so that insecurity, eventually, it becomes disobedience, and it makes God mad. And that's something we have to be careful with, is that we do not bridge our insecurities with almost this doubt that God can't handle us too. And sometimes we do that. God might be telling us, well, you really need to show patience in this moment, even though they're making you mad. And you think in your head, I'm not going to do that. That's going to make me look weak. Or you need to pray for them right here, right now, out loud. I know that that's scary, but you need to pray for them. Well, what if they think I'm weird? Or what if I'm not ready to show that I'm a Christian yet? You need to not participate in that thing everybody else is doing because you know it's wrong. Well, if I do that, I'm going to be a social outcast, and I don't think that you could bring me into another friend group right now, so I'm not going to do that. Surrender your plans. Go into full-time ministry. But everyone else is going into business and finance at the state school, and so I feel like that's probably what I should be doing instead. We love to project our excuses on God instead of believing that He's capable enough of handling our insecurities. And so God, how does he respond? Well, the first thing that he does is he doesn't, when Moses asks, who am I? God doesn't respond by increasing Moses' ability. Well, I have trouble talking. Okay, well, I'll fix your talking, your speech impediment. Here you go. He doesn't do that. He responds by reminding him of who is with him. Real, true confidence doesn't come from believing in ourselves. It comes from believing that God is with us, and his presence will go with us even when we feel incapable. And then God also provides help. He doesn't excuse Moses from the calling. He doesn't say, fine, you think it's too hard, I'll give you an easier route. But he affirms it. And he provides Moses with the help that he needs to overcome any sort of physical, mental, emotional, spiritual insecurities in order to get the kingdom work done that needs to be done. And so what is the key takeaway from this specific individual? Well, that obedience matters more than abilities because God goes with those he calls. Obedience matters more than your abilities because God goes with those he calls, so you don't have to worry about not being capable enough. God is going to bridge that for you if you choose to obey. The second thing that we're going to be looking at is this insecurity and identity that we find in Judges chapter 6. This is one of my favorite VeggieTales stories. I don't know if you've ever seen Gideon. Chapter 6, we're going to be in verse 11. But this story, it's really interesting because Gideon isn't like one of those characters that gets his whole book in the Bible. He kind of just gets these brief excerpts. But it takes place during a really dark and chaotic period in Israel's history, kind of known as the Judges, where the nation is just repeatedly, turning away from God. And because of their disobedience, God allows the Midianites to oppress Israel for 7 years. And the Midianites, they invade the land, they destroy the crops, they leave the Israelites starving and afraid. And people are hiding, literally like in caves and mountains, to just survive from these oppressors. And in the middle of this kind of fear and desperation, we find this random character, Gideon, and he's secretly threshing wheat in this wine press to hide food from the enemy. And this is when the angel of the Lord appears to him and gives him like this radical message. And so in Judges chapter 6, we're in verse 11. It says, "Now the angel of the Lord came and sat under at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash I'm so bad at this, Abizarite, while his son Gideon was beating out the wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, 'The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor,'" or some of them say mighty warrior. "And Gideon said to him, 'Please, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all of this happened to us? And where are all of his wonderful deeds that our fathers recounted to us, saying, Did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us and given us into the hand of Midian.' And the Lord turned to him and said, 'Go in this might of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Do not I send you?' And he said to him, 'Please, Lord, how can I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house.' And the Lord said to him, 'But I will be with you, and you shall strike the Midianites as one man.'" Okay, so here we see how Gideon responds, and we see how God responds. And so clearly Gideon, he responds with some questions as well, similar to Moses, but his look a little bit different because it's not necessarily just in this insecurity and ability. It's really an insecurity and identity. But one of the first things that he wrestles with, and I think it's really interesting because I feel it really prevalently sometimes in my life, is he doubts God's presence. That's the first area of insecurity that he starts to feeling. Gideon interprets Israel's suffering as evidence that God is just absent. His insecurity shows itself in doubting God's care and attention to his people when things are not going the way that he would hope that they might. He's asking the question we all ask: why do bad things happen to good people? But also, too, you have to think about these weren't exactly the most purest of people. We just heard that Israel has been turning away from God time and time again, and so they're in this refining sort of period. But it feels silent. It feels like he's not there. They're sitting in this season of suffering, and Gideon's asking, where is this God? Because our fathers have been saying that there's a God who's brought everybody out of Egypt, they've rescued him, and now we're here and we're held captives again. I'm hiding food in a wine press, so that people don't come over and take it and I starve. And so he doubts God's presence. And then Gideon focuses on his weaknesses and his status. He focuses on his weaknesses and his status. He says that he's of the lowest clan. He is the least, he's a nobody is what he's saying. Why are you, an angel of the Lord, appearing to me when there are probably so many other more sophisticated, more popular, more powerful people that you could be appearing to sort of encounter this rescue story, really? And you pick me, the lowest of clans, over here hiding food in a wine press. That's who you choose to show up for? And then he also needs some repeated assurance to fully believe that God's going to use him. Later on in the verses, we didn't read it, but he asks God for signs. Prove yourself to me because I still don't believe you. He needs repeated assurance. And then how does God respond to this? And first thing he does is he speaks of his identity rather than his ability. And he's not calling him the lowest of low clans. He calls him a mighty warrior. That's the first thing that he does, is he calls Gideon a mighty warrior. And it's not because he's a mighty warrior in that moment. He definitely isn't. He speaks to Gideon about who he's going to become, not who he is right now. And that's something that God does so well, is he calls us based off of where we are going, not who we are now or who we were in the past. He focuses on that redemption that's happening within us. And also, too, God patiently gives him assurance. He doesn't immediately reject Gideon for his doubts. He doesn't say, you don't believe me, well then too bad, I'm out, I'll go find somebody else. He patiently meets Gideon where he is at. So God sees us and he uses who we are becoming, not where we come from. And that's something to take assurance in as we wrestle with insecurity in ourselves, is that he doesn't see the work in progress that we are now necessarily. He sees us as his kingdom work, his players in this game that is happening here on earth to restore a kingdom that will come in the future. And he already sees that. We don't. Okay? Then we also are going to jump over to John. Last one, I know we've been jumping everywhere in the Bible. John, chapter 4. So we've looked at insecurity and abilities, insecurity and our identity. And the last thing we're going to be looking at is our insecurity and our worth. This is something that I feel like a lot of people in our generation struggle with, while our mistakes are oftentimes made very public in culture and society today. Insecurity and worth. We're going to be in John chapter 4, verse 4 through 30, so read with me. And he had to pass through Samaria, so he came to a town of Samaria called, don't know that one either, Johnny. Sychar? Did I say that right? Sure. Okay, near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, so Jesus, was weary as he went from his journey, was sitting beside the well. It was about the 6th hour. A woman from Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink," for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria?" For Jews had no dealings with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it was that it was saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw water with, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob? He gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and his livestock." Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water, so that I will not be thirsty or have to come here to draw water." Jesus said to her, "Go call your husband and come here." The woman answered him, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You are right in saying, 'I have no husband,' for you have had 5 husbands, and the one you have now is not your husband. What you have said is true." The woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you say that in Jerusalem is a place where people ought to worship." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You will worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming and now is here when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth." The woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all these things. Jesus said to her, "I who speak to you am he." Just then his disciples came back. They marveled that he was talking with a woman, but no one said, "What do you seek?" or "Why are you talking with her?" So the woman left her water jar and went into town and said to the people, "Come, see a man who told me all that I ever did. Can this be Christ?" They went out of the town and were coming to him. And so this is honestly just a really beautiful story of how Jesus faces the insecurity and the worth. The first way that really we see her respond to her insecurity and her worth is she responds by living in isolation. She knows what she's doing is wrong. She knows that everything she's been doing hasn't been aligning with what that social cultural standard looks like. And so she goes to draw water out at noon, which is the hottest part of the day, and no other woman did that. They did it in the early morning or late at night when it's nice and cool outside. But she goes out in the middle of the day because she knows she won't run into anybody. And so she won't have to talk to anybody. She won't have to be embarrassed because of all of the things that she has done. And so really we kind of see this insecurity from her sin, both her past sin and her current sin. She's had all of these husbands, and she's living with somebody she's not married to right now. And so she's insecure about her sin, and so she lives in isolation. She's not going to get rid of the sin in her life, but she chooses to cut out everybody so that she can just deal with it on her own. And then we also see that she deflects to surface level conversation, and this is a skill our generation is really good at, because she's afraid that Jesus is going to discover who she really is. And when Jesus begins speaking with her, she shifts that conversation to just ethnic and cultural differences between those Jews and the Samaritans. She avoids engaging deeply. When people feel exposed, they often change the subject, or they want to stay on surface level conversations. And one thing that I want to stop right here and ask you, and this might be a little pushy, I don't know, what do your small group conversations look like? Because that's the area where really that insecurity and that worth, that surface level conversation, that deflecting to kind of the day-to-day stuff, that's not where that kind of conversation should be happening. Small group conversations are for the deeper level conversations where you feel like you are in a safe space to talk about the insecurities and your abilities and your identities and your worth. How do your friend conversations look like? The friends that you hang out with, are you able to have those deeper level conversations where you explore the insecurities in your worth, in your abilities, and your identity, or does it stay very surface level because you're deflecting, because you're choosing to not let people get to know the real you because you're afraid it's going to alter your worth? And then how does God respond to all of that? He initiates the conversation. First of all, he intentionally crosses those social, cultural, gender barriers, and he pursues someone who feels unwanted and unseen. He also offers her something greater than what she came for. Jesus shows that her deepest thirst is not a physical thirst, but spiritual. Her insecurity and broken relationships cannot satisfy her soul. He reveals truth without condemnation. Jesus confronts insecurity by bringing up the truth and the grace together. He reveals her story not to condemn her, but to show her that he is the source of restoration and to restore that. And he also gives her new identity and purpose. The woman who once avoided people, she becomes the one telling everybody about Jesus. The one that came out at noon because she didn't want to run into people and have to talk to them and wants to live in isolation and wants to keep everything surface level because they're afraid they're going to know who she really is. She runs into town screaming and telling people about Jesus, and she becomes the very first evangelist. The woman who was wrestling with her insecurity and her worth becomes the first evangelist. So what do we see here? We see that because Jesus meets us with truth and grace, our past does not disqualify us from being used by God. It doesn't matter what you've done, what you've been thinking about doing, what you do when other people aren't looking, what you do with your friends, how you keep your circle here and your circle at school different. It doesn't matter what your past looks like. It does not disqualify you from being used by God, because when we come to God with our insecurities, he meets us with truth and grace. It's so good to be reminded of that, because we live in a culture where we hold all of our insecurities inside, and we decide that we let those insecurities define who we are, where we're going to go, what we're going to do, and all of this contradicts that. And I think that one of the reasons why it does contradict it is because we're told that it's all about us. That you create your story, you create your future, you create, but it's never been about us. And so when your perspective shifts, so does your insecurities, because it's never been about you, and that's literally what we just sang about. Insecurity, it often reveals where we are relying on ourselves. God transforms insecurity into dependence, identity, redemption, and purpose. When you ask yourself, where do I feel the most insecure in my life? That is where you have been relying on yourself. Your abilities, your identity, your looks, your worth, whatever it is, where you find the most insecurity, that is where you have been relying on yourself. God transforms that into dependence on him, identity in him, redemption in him, and purpose in him. And so as we close out kind of this conversation on what insecurity looks like, I wanted to give you guys a couple of pieces of tangible ways where you could practice handling insecurity and what that might look like. So the first thing that you can do is stop hiding. Don't be the Samaritan woman who lives her life in isolation and carries on conversations at a surface level because you're afraid people are going to get to know who you are. Stop hiding and let people walk with you. The second thing is talk to God honestly about your insecurity. We saw Moses do that. He asked him so many questions and posed a lot of different excuses as to why he was the most inadequate for the job. Talk to God honestly. We see that in Psalms all of the time. David saying, "Where are you, God? Why have you left me here? Who am I?" Like we see him ask a lot of those existential type questions in Psalms. Talk honestly to God about what you are insecure about and ask him to highlight those areas in your life. Learn to replace the lies in your head with truth. And that's a practice that doesn't come easily because it involves you identifying when your brain is hardwired to start telling those lies to yourself and replace it with the truth. Stop talking about all the ways that you fall short and start talking about all the ways God can meet you in that spot and who he is rather than who you are. And then lastly, act in obedience, trusting that God will take care of the rest. The best thing that we can do here on earth as believers is to meet God's calling with obedience. And when we do that, we see him meet all of the other needs that we were questioning before. We can trust in him to do that. And so I'm going to pray for us, and then you are dismissed to small groups so you have time to talk about it. Hey, Jesus, we love you. We are so grateful that we can pause and come to church on a Wednesday and just in the middle of our week, halfway done, halfway to go. I pray that as we go out into these small groups, that our small groups are not just places where we have those surface level conversations, but that we feel brave enough to go deeper and to talk more about the things that we oftentimes struggle with, the areas in our lives where we rely on ourselves instead of you. I pray that you would highlight areas in our life where we do need to rely more on you and speak those identities and those truths over our lives so that we can walk in obedience and confidence of who you have created us to be. We love you, Lord. It's your name we pray. Amen.